بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. In the name of Allah, I send salutations upon His beloved Messenger Muhammad, the selected one. Peace and blessings be upon him. We're going to try and make sense of the career of the Quranic teacher and activist. This is Muhammad Israel relating the story from 1986, and this is in transition between Dakar and Louga. So the Quran that we were studying in Dakar would again reach to right around the area of, one may even argue, the surah of the king, mulk, or of kingdom, whichever one may choose. So once we left the AKF establishment, Abdul Karim Fall, I want to say that it was not necessarily once we were gone for good. There were occasions in which, brief occasions, we would come and we would visit, and then we would go back to Grand Yoff. I'm going to try and elaborate as much as possible about Grand Yoff. Again, the marriage that had taken my mother to Grand Yoff was under another who was outside of the tariqah, and we discussed that. So they were not a murid, a tijan, a lion. They were not a qadri or anything. They were known as Ibadur Rahman. Before I go that far, prior to even coming to Africa, the first major group confrontation was at the age of, that I witnessed, was about the age of 4 years old. This is where my mother and her co-wives had a go at it in front of the masjid. I bring it up because the co-wife would be the stepmother of my younger brother, Isa. Later on, that's going to become relevant. My mother did sustain an injury to the arm, where she was hit with a pipe, and that swelled the arm for some days. Now, as we fast forward onto these years in Dakar, or in Senegal, I should say, West Africa, once we were on break from the Saturday and Sunday school, that was the only schooling we would be having in transition. My older brother and I were placed there. I do believe our older brother at the time is still in Mbake, where he is studying at the French Arabic school. My younger brother had been taken away to Fas Touré, which is a Quranic school of its own, some 200 odd kilometers also from the capital. He was taken there by the stepfather. Our stepfather at the time was Jabai, and he was known once he got there as Isa Jabai. But again, the marriage did not last. The era or the time period from when my mother divorced, or when her and Mr. Jabai went their separate ways, she actually did have a very, very interesting time sending us to Fajr on her own, because in Senegal, those of us who have been to such populated Muslim countries, we know that for the adhan, when they call to pray, everybody hears it, in these major populated areas. So this was no exception, and we always tend to be thrown out of the house at Fajr to go and pray. Prior to that, we would walk outside with the husband at the time. And of course, us being into this newer population, it took us out of what was known as the adopted or the foster setting that we had been in for some years, 3.5, maybe 4 years by this time. And it brought us into like this whole building of strangers, a 2 or 3 story building, strangers, and we're hearing, like now we are actually in the population of the country, instead of just being exclusively, to AKF compound where, breakfast, lunch, and dinner provided, the mangoes in the back, you might be able to find some that are ripe or some other fruits. Things were actually provided. But once, my mother is living in a country where she has no relatives, there's no such thing as Social Security benefits, nothing, unemployment, nothing like that. She's really struggling. She had to move us into all just one. And by the way, that was practically the first time moving from AKF into Grand Yoff in that setting. When I reached the little apartment, I believe it was a 3-bedroom, she and a co-wife. And then, we got another room. Aside from that, I do believe it was a 3-bedroom. I don't think it was more. Or maybe each one of them had their own. Maybe ours was a 3-bedroom where her husband would be in one room, and then the kitchen or the living room. I think everybody shared the kitchen, everybody shared the restroom. The entire building or the entire people on that one floor. But then our room would be the other. Now her co-wife, had a separate apartment, and there was a co-wife. They were co-wives ever since I can remember the whole situation. They were always co-wives. But once I felt very, very saddened, and I cannot remember what the circumstances of, or why my mother, wanted me to do something that I did not want to do, or why I wanted to do something she didn't want me to do. But to make a long story short, I did flee. I did run away from home, if one may say, and I went to ISAS. I went to the home that I felt most secure, and the father was happy at that time to see me, and he got wind of the fact that my mother had divorced again, and he gave some consolidation. He didn't ask me to leave right away. He didn't do that. He didn't ask me to leave at all that time. He didn't say, Achachibiti, get out of here. He didn't do that at the time. And I believe I did ask, I did ask for leave, because I believe like the next day or so. I cannot remember when I ran away, if I ran away only for one day and just to see him and get some money from him. Then I believe I spent the night. I want to say I spent the night. I want to say I got the money from the evening. I spent the night and then made it back the next day. But how did I get from Grand Yoff to ISAS? I walked most of the park, and as I got closer and closer towards Jamagan, or as I passed the Postachari, which is a good way away, one of the tractor trailers who worked at the garage, so they were driving one of his trucks, saw me and said, "Aren't you the brother to, what are you doing here?" And hold on, let me get you home. Who hadn't been aware of all the circumstances. So I got a ride in a tractor trailer home, to ISAS. Then, of course, the next morning when I got back, I walked in, and my mother's there, and she's like, "Where were you?" And I told her I went to see the father, and of course she scrolled me, and then she had my senses beat out of me. And as she was beating out, money that I got from the father fell out of my pocket, which was very much welcomed, because we were still trying to, or she had been trying to figure out what to do for the next few meals. And here she was beating me, and the Senegalese francs was falling out of my pocket. After she finished beating me up, I'm starting to pick things up, this change. And my brother is like, "How much is this? Is this enough?" And I'm like, "Yeah, give me my money." She's like, "Where did you get it from?" And I say, "Father gave it to me," as I'm almost wiping off my tears. Sitting did do a better job than my mother beating my tail. But nevertheless, the money wasn't that much, but I gave back, and then just kind of went on. But then when we would go, subsequently, it wasn't as simple, or just, I missed my fellow brethren there. But then I did kind of ask about, Muridiya and sitting Tuba, like, why do we swear? In the name of sitting Tuba, why are we swearing? that's bid'ah, and I didn't really know what bid'ah necessarily was. I just know that I was taught in which, under those circumstances, like you are swearing. But long story short, there was always, at that point, we started, to look at, okay, what was ESES really, what did we really gain from ESES? And point out certain things which we were taught were inaccurate in Tariqah altogether. So we did do that, I did do that. And at times, I mean, it was okay because they were really, ESES was a French cultural setting, if you may. There was some Quran, some Islam, but that wasn't really the scope of it. So at times it would be understandable. Mainly it would be understandable. It would not really be a big issue immediately because it's not as if they wanted to defend. They just knew what they knew, and they didn't care about what anybody else had to say about what they knew. So it wasn't quite a big issue. It wasn't as big of an issue. When, of course, things would get really, really tough, and we would have, my mother made sure that besides us getting out to go pray Fajr, when we came back, she would spend a lot of time talking to us. I mean, she'd just be talking and talking and talking up a storm about why we were here in Africa instead of being in America, and what it is that she really wanted us to do, and we would be an exception if we had completed the Quran. We didn't deserve to be at ESES. We didn't deserve to be anywhere but in a Quranic setting, in Islam, and culture. And we don't know how fortunate and how lucky we would be out of America, where majority of folks are trying to live from hand to mouth. Anyhow, that was a big thing. And then the other thing was that she would actually make time to ask us, what our day, try to plan our day out together. And these were things that she did. But again, we would take what she was saying with a grain of salt initially, and we would run in the room and start giggling and laughing about it. But this was at the time that Falak Abdul Fattah had returned from Mbake. He was no longer at that school there. So it's 3 of us, my sister included, making us 4. We were living in this one big, large room. This was the first time really in this building. We couldn't stay at the apartment. We couldn't afford that, so we just moved into this one big room at the bottom floor, and there's 5 of us. When you walk into this room, and it has almost like a shoe make or a hall along with the room. So the hall, 1 mattress was there, and then the big, nice size room. Maybe I would say it could have been this room. I possibly would give it a 400 square footage, maybe 500 square foot. But it's just one big room. It has some closets in it. My mother would have the corner with her, queen size bed, and then her and my sister would sleep in that bed possibly, and then the other 2 mattresses were, at the bottom of that mattress on the opposite sides. So we would be under these conditions, and at times, we would try and plan out, so where are we going to get our next meal from, and we would have these suggestions, and then my mother would send us to different areas. And one of the things were, whilst we were there was FAN, or the University of Shanta Job, where she had built this alliance, which we'll talk a little bit more about, or whether it was to Sikap, or whether it was to Ashlam, or wherever we were going individually or together. My mother included. One of the things that she would, or we would all try to make sure that we did on our way back, which is one of the traditions in Senegal, is that you're given pass, you're given transportation fare. So when we all came back with the transportation fare left over, we would use that leftover to buy the breakfast, and then use the remaining change to go to our next places where we could possibly get these rations from. So this was a survival. Now there was a time or two that she went to AKF himself to explain the situation to him. And I don't know exactly, well, I heard once, but before I get into that, he made it a point, and I would say maybe the year or 2 years after we got out of there, at least 2 years after, I believe, when he gave out his zakah. This is AKF. And I don't know if we discussed or I talked about how he gave out zakah, but it would be a time period in the year where he would have a lot of stacks full of money at his dining table. He and his secretary Chombe would be involved in packeting the money into the envelopes. We kids sometimes would come and we would just sit quietly, just watching. He wouldn't say anything. He would not chase us away. He barely wouldn't talk to us. They would just be putting money in envelopes. And so this was something, that at least I witnessed her receiving from him after we left the compound, at least on 2 different occasions. But it did not happen as simple as, okay, I came and, I get an envelope. No. I don't really know the very first specifics on when she got the envelopes. I do know that there were at least 2 times when she went to explain the situation to him about the destitution or the desperate condition we were in. And Rashida Lubnani